Okay, in previous tutorials, I've gone over rules 1 through 4. The first rule was about using commas in a list of particulars. Second rule was about commas after transitional phrases. The third rule was about surrounding appositive phrases with commas. And the fourth rule was about comma usage with regard to independent and subordinate clauses. Without beating a dead horse too much, we're going to move on to the next rule, which is about independent clauses. You can separate two independent clauses with a semicolon if the two independent clauses are somehow related. So this is really handy when you have a lot of facts or things that you need to point out in a row, and instead of putting them with periods, they're more closely related. You would really like to have, instead of the abrupt period stops, you could put the semicolons between each other, and they'd have the same function. Here in this example, we have an independent clause. Mr. Bailey enjoys coaching, semicolon. It is an opportunity to teach. These two are, like, it is an opportunity to teach is an independent clause. Mr. Bailey enjoys coaching is an independent clause. Therefore, we can separate them with a semicolon. What we need to do right now is to write another example of this. The students in my class right now, come up with your own example of how to do this, two independent clauses. I'm going to write my own for an example. Okay. So come up with your own example. I said summer school has been fun. I've enjoyed teaching this group of kids. Independent clause, and they're related, and they're separated with that magic semicolon. One of the reasons we need to know this rule, though, is on certain standardized tests, they will put sentences that include a semicolon, and if you have no idea if it's being used correctly or not, you're not going to know whether or not to eliminate that as a distractor. So if I gave an example of it being used correctly, people are generally good because, semicolon, they want to do well. This is an example of it being absolutely used incorrectly. In fact, if we were to follow our rules about independent clauses leading into a subordinate clause, the correct answer would be, if we had to revise that, I'll actually just copy and paste it to make it easier to correct. The correct answer would be to eliminate any punctuation after with good and because. So that's just an example of the type of thing. They'll actually put this kind of a trick question in there. We don't want the trick question. We want it to be correct. I'm going to write one more example of how to use a semicolon correctly, and that should be sufficient. But just remember, you can separate two closely related independent clauses with a semicolon. Are easy to use. And there you go. Independent clause, closely related, we can use a semicolon.